All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about one of the most amazing logistics operations in the entire universe. And guess what? It's happening inside your body right now. We're going to follow the wild journey of oxygen from your lungs all the way to your cells. And we're going to meet the tiny little marvel that makes it all possible. Think about this for a second. You take something like 20,000 breaths every single day. It's automatic, you don't even think about it. But breathing in is just step one. The real magic, the part that keeps you alive, is what happens next. How does that oxygen get from your lungs to, say, the muscle in your pinky toe? Well, here's the mission. You have trillions of cells in your body, and every single one is like a tiny power plant. And just like any power plant, it needs fuel to make energy. Oxygen is the key ingredient that lets your cells generate the power for everything you do, from blinking to thinking to running a marathon. Now, you might think, can't the oxygen just dissolve in the blood and kind of float along? Well, not really. It turns out oxygen is terrible at dissolving in water-based liquids like blood. If we had to rely on that, we'd only get about 3% of the oxygen we actually need. So nature had to invent a dedicated, super efficient delivery service. And that brings us to the hero of our story, a protein called hemoglobin. This molecule is, and I'm not exaggerating, the perfect vehicle. It's a microscopic masterpiece of engineering, and your red blood cells are jam-packed with millions of them, all designed for one single purpose, to grab oxygen and drop it off exactly where it needs to go. So how in the world do you build a perfect oxygen delivery machine? It's actually fascinating. Nature starts with these really simple building blocks and pieces them together into this incredibly complex structure. Let's try and build one ourselves. Okay, so here's the official description. Hemoglobin is a protein, and it lives inside your red blood cells. Its whole job is to latch onto oxygen in your lungs and carry it through your bloodstream. And here's a fun fact, hemoglobin by itself is actually pretty toxic, which is why it's so clever that it's all safely packaged up inside the red blood cell. The build process is pretty cool. You start with 4 little things called chiral rings. You link those together, and that forms a bigger, flatter structure. Then, and this is the most important part, you pop a single atom of iron right in the middle. That whole thing is called heme. To finish it off, you attach a big, folded protein chain called a globin, and boom, you've got one piece of the puzzle. But here's the kicker. A complete, working hemoglobin molecule isn't just one of those units. It's 4 of them, all joined together. And this is the best way to think about it. Imagine a single hemoglobin molecule is a little 4-seater delivery car. Each of those heme groups we just built, that's a seat, just waiting for an oxygen molecule to come along and take a ride. Okay, our 4-seater car is built and ready to go. So what's its first stop? The loading dock, of course. We're headed to the lungs, where all these hemoglobin cars are pulling up to get their precious cargo of oxygen. But what actually makes the oxygen get into the car? The secret is pressure. Simple as that. Inside your lungs, the concentration of oxygen is super high. We can measure this as a partial pressure of about 100 millimeters of mercury. You can just imagine a huge crowd of oxygen molecules, all pushing and shoving, trying to get on board the next available ride. Now compare that to the blood that's just arriving back at the lungs. It's used up a lot of its oxygen, so its pressure is way down, only about 40. It's a much less crowded, low-pressure situation. And this is just basic physics, right? Things always move from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. It's that simple difference that acts like an engine, literally pushing oxygen molecules out of your lungs and right into the empty seats on those hemoglobin cars. But here is something that is just mind-blowing. When that hemoglobin car pulls up to the lungs to get loaded, it is not empty, not even close. In a person who's just resting, the blood coming back to the lungs still has 3 of its 4 seats filled with oxygen. It's 75% full. This means your body keeps this huge reserve on hand, and at rest, it only needs to top off that one empty seat. So the car is full, it's driving away from the lungs, but how does it know where to stop? How does it know which specific cells are hungry for oxygen and which ones are doing fine? This isn't random. It is an incredibly intelligent delivery system. You see, hemoglobin is a smart molecule. It's what scientists call an allosteric protein, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's a shapeshifter. And by changing its shape, it can change how tightly it holds on to its oxygen passengers. It's got a super tight grip where oxygen is plentiful, like the lungs, and a really loose grip where oxygen is needed out in the tissues. So let's break that down. In the lungs, high oxygen pressure means hemoglobin's attraction, or affinity, for oxygen is through the roof. It grabs on and holds tight, getting up to about 97% full. But then, when that car travels out to your muscles, where the cells have been using up oxygen, the pressure is low, and that signals the hemoglobin to loosen its grip, making it really easy for oxygen to hop off. So what this all means is that when you're just chillin', each little hemoglobin car arrives at its destination with 4 passengers, and it only drops one of them off. It leaves with 3. That's just a 25% drop-off. It's unbelievably efficient, and it always keeps that 75% reserve ready to go, just in case. And that reserve, well, that brings us to the most brilliant part of the whole system. What happens when you do need it? What happens when you go from sitting on the couch to sprinting down the street and your muscles are suddenly screaming for more fuel? I mean, your body can't just instantly pump way more blood. It needs a faster solution. It needs to get more oxygen out of the blood that's already there. So how does hemoglobin know, hey, this spot right here needs an extra delivery? This is where the local environment sends out distress signals. When your muscles work hard, they create waste products. They get hotter. They produce more carbon dioxide. And they release acids, which lowers the pH. Now, the source material had this fantastic analogy for it. It describes these factors as snakes in the car. Imagine these things suddenly showing up in the hemoglobin car, making it so uncomfortable that the oxygen passengers are practically forced to jump out. So those local signals, the heat, the CO2, the acid, they all force hemoglobin to change its shape and dramatically weaken its grip on oxygen. So instead of dropping off just one oxygen molecule, maybe it drops off 2 or even 3. It floods that hard-working muscle with exactly what it needs, right when it needs it. It's a perfect, self-regulating system of supply and demand. And this whole process, this incredibly elegant dance of pressure and chemistry and shape-shifting, it's not a special occasion. It's happening with every single breath you take, adjusting second by second to whatever your body needs. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible hidden marvels are perfectly at work inside you at this very moment?